the same song you remember. You can try, but it's just plain wrong. Having lots of late nights, but it really wears you down. Fans of hippie music, oh, light a candle for the underground. It's not the same song you remember. You can try, but it's just plain wrong.
Good morning, everyone. The session will start in 3 minutes. 3 minutes, the session will start. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I hope everybody slept well, had a good breakfast, not too much partying last night. Hands up if you were responsible. I see very few hands. All right. I'm Daniel Bernhard. Good morning. I'm the CEO of the Institute for Canadian Citizenship. I'm also quite new here. I'm new in my job. I started just in September, and by extension, I'm quite new to this world of work. And so it's a pleasure to be finally out of confinement and to be meeting everybody here today. But also want to say that it's a real personal honor to be here. You know, we are on land that was gradually inhabited by more and more and more settlers, and will continue to be inhabited by more and more settlers. And I owe everything in my life to my parents' decision to come to Canada. And all of us are the same, no matter when we arrived and no matter when we will arrive. And so it's an honor personally, but also as a citizen, to be here in a room with you who've dedicated your professional lives to facilitating that settlement, to making it more just, more fair, and to bringing people from around the world to a place where they can live in peace and prosperity. So thank you very much for all you do, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to be moderating a panel about the Afghan refugees, but before I do, I've got a brief announcement that I think you should find exciting. So people often ask me, what does the Institute for Canadian Citizenship do? And that's a very good question. And I think the best way to describe it is actually with a picture. So if you want to think about this journey from arrival to citizenship on the one hand, and isolation to involvement or engagement on the other, there's a lot of service, and many of you are providing services right at that crucial phase of arrival, right at the beginning. Our job is to be the second person in the relay, to help to complete that journey from arrival to citizenship, to ownership, to being truly part of the Canadian family in every possible way. And we do that in a number of ways. We do that by hosting enhanced citizenship ceremonies across the country in both official languages in every province and territory. We do about 70 of those every year. We do it by publishing policy reports, public policy research on a variety of subjects, everything from cultural integration, sports, voting, entrepreneurship, you name it, we've studied it, and there's plenty more yet to come. But the project that I'm here to talk to you about today is our flagship program, if you like. And it started on a school bus in Toronto when the founder of our organization saw some kids trickling out of a school bus on their way to a museum near her home. Kids from all over the world, kids from all backgrounds, having this lovely formative experience, not just of education, but of taking advantage of Canada's cultural patrimony. And she said, this is fantastic. What about the parents? How can we make sure that adults also have experiences like this? That was in 2010. And at that point, our Canoe Cultural Access Pass was born. And the Canoe Access Pass gives new citizens to Canada the very best of Canadian culture and nature for free. From that one attraction that started back in 2010, today we have 1,400 attractions in the network. Canoe members also get 50% off of a Via Rail ticket anywhere in the country. And this is, I think I can say quite safely, the most successful program that you have never heard of. Since 2010, we've had 420,000 new Canadian citizens participate in this program. And the experiences have been absolutely transformative. This is the Dixit family. They've been sending us photos of their time on Canoe. During the pandemic, they've discovered every single hiking trail around the city where they live, and it's become an absolutely fantastic pastime for bonding with their family. They have not paid for one day pass. They have not paid for one parking pass the entire time. This is Nuno. Nuno came to Canada from Brazil, wasn't so sure about the winter, became a citizen, bought a ticket right across Canada, brought his dog, discovered the Rockies, and found out that maybe the winter isn't so bad after all. We've had lots of families who take their kids out for the weekend. Taking children out can cost up to $100, depending on how many kids you have, and that doesn't even count parking and food. With Canoe, it's free. Science centers right across the country have been a fantastic attraction. And most importantly, Canoe has given newcomers an opportunity to engage with Canada's Indigenous peoples, engage with our history, and engage with our future in a way that many of them have never done before. The best part about this program, though, is that it works. 86% of people who use Canoe report that they have an enhanced sense of belonging in Canada after just 1 year on the program. And the reason why I'm here is because this program is too small. And it's too small, not in my opinion, but I can prove it. While Canadian immigration has gone up over the years, the percentage of permanent residents who are seeking citizenship within 10 years of arrival has taken a nosedive. And this is a really alarming statistic. There's a crisis of confidence happening with newcomers with respect to Canada. And we need to fix it. We need to address it. We need to respond. We all know that newcomers are our future. It's not an economic thing only. It's a cultural thing. It's about energy. It's about ideas. It's about optimism. It's about vision. It's about culture. And if we cannot fix this problem, we as a country will have a major, major, major challenge continuing to be peaceful and prosperous into the future. So this journey from arrival to citizenship is broken, and we need to come up with creative ways to fix it. And so our team at the Institute for Canadian Citizenship, we went back, we thought about this, we said, how can we reverse this trend? What can we do to respond? And most importantly, how can we dream a dream that's big enough and creative enough and adventurous enough to be worthy of the newcomers that we're trying to serve? Picking up your life and moving across the world is not an easy feat. We need to have a dream that's big enough to show newcomers that we value and respect them in hopes that they'll believe in us too. And so today I'm here to announce that we are relaunching the Canoe Access Pass, and we are making a major expansion to it, which I think will touch upon all of your work, and hopefully many of you will be able to use the pass soon. Canoe 2.0 is about to get way bigger. As I mentioned earlier, Canoe is available today to almost 200,000 new citizens every year. As of our relaunch in a couple of weeks, Canoe will be available to over 2 million permanent residents within their first 5 years of arrival in Canada. That's 2 million more people who can go from the Biodome to Banff, Pier 21 to the Museum of Anthropology here in Vancouver for free as many times as they would like for a year. I cannot think of a better Welcome to Canada box than that. But it's not just going to be bigger. Canoe 2.0 is going to be better. Actually, it's going to be way better. There is a whole new variety of offerings that are going to be on this app when it is released in mid-April. And I'm just going to give you a little taste of a couple of those things. Every single permanent resident within their first 5 years of Canada will have a free digital subscription to the Toronto International Film Festival. The Toronto Football Club, the Vancouver Whitecaps, will be offering discounted tickets up to 75% off for children, to 35% off for adults, without limits for 1 whole year. The BC Lions and other CFL teams across Canada are offering discounted tickets for newcomers for the duration of their Canoe membership period. There are other activities. We had an agreement this week with Dragon Boat BC, which is an amazing organization with a whole bunch of boats, Dragon and otherwise, that people will be able to make use of, get out into nature and into the water. The Calgary Philharmonic Orchestra, the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, rather, have offered free and discounted tickets. The list goes on and on and on. But my personal favorite, 15% off, up to 4 tickets, anywhere in Canada with Air Canada. To be able to travel the country, make it your own, and have beautiful, life-affirming memories of this place. So there are going to be a lot of different reasons why people are coming to Canoe, not just for the attractions, but for the travel. And I hope very much that you will send the newcomers that you work with to Canoe to refer them to download the app. It's 100% free. But no matter how they get there, no matter why they come, I want them to find you. We will have an audience of people who may not realize that they need settlement services, who may not know that settlement services exist. And therefore, we think Canoe is a fantastic opportunity to let them know about it. And we're building what can be described as an advertising platform into Canoe, not to help people buy toasters, but to let them know what fantastic settlement services are available near where they are that fit their family circumstance. And so we've got a booth outside. And I hope that you'll come, sign up, give us your information, we'll get in touch with you, and we want to put your services in front of these people. They may not know that they want the settlement services. They may be coming for something cheap to do on the weekend. They may be coming for an outdoor experience that they're looking for, but we want them to find you there, and we think that people will take advantage of the fabulous services that you offer. So here you go. You can scan the QR code with your phone. You can do it right now. You can save the people at the booth a bit of trouble. And we would love to be in touch with you. Canada has a story that we tell ourselves about being the most welcoming country on earth. And while that's generally true, we're seeing this emerging crisis of confidence. And so our goal with Canoe, and in partnership with you, is to see if we can make that story of Canada just a little bit more true every day. So I'm very excited, and I want to thank you for hearing me out this morning. I'm now going to put on my hat as a as a panel moderator, because while Canoe is now going to be expanding to permanent residents, there are still a lot of people who are not able to access Canoe, whether they're refugee claimants or international students. We're working on that. And there are a lot of people who are not yet able even to come to Canada. And the situation of the refugees trying to leave Afghanistan is top of mind for all of us, not only as we see now a new wave of refugees coming from Ukraine, but because of Canada's long involvement in Afghanistan as being in part responsible for the conditions that are causing people to flee. And so we have still many people who are not able to come to the country, who are not able to avail themselves of our services or of yours. And I think this is a really important moment for us to reflect on these implications. And so to that effect, I would like to call up our panel for today, and we can move into this conversation to this early plenary. You can wear whatever you want. I mean, yeah. Yeah. He's asked if he needs to bring a mask. Yeah. Okay. You are here in the right place, and you'll speak from the podium. All right, so I would like to introduce our esteemed panelists from my left to my far left. First, to my immediate left is Aziz Rafiee. Aziz is Executive Director of the Afghan Civil Society Forum, which is an umbrella organization for civil society and human rights operating in every province of Afghanistan. He's got 35 years of civil society and human rights work experience. Aziz is the founder of over 20 different organizations dedicated to civil society and the protection of human rights. And he arrived in Canada this past October as a refugee from Afghanistan. So please join me in welcoming Aziz Rafiee. Left of Aziz is John Biles, whose title is fantastic. Senior Director, Settlement Network, Resettlement Operations Directorate, Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. And I'm not going to try it in French. Yeah. And Fariborz says, wait tomorrow, there'll be another one added on. Throughout his career, John has held various positions with Metropolis, as well as a special advisor to the Director General and of the policy branch responsible for settlement, and more recently, he was director for the PNT program, for the PNT region rather, with IRCC. John, welcome. To the left of John, we have Fariborz Birjandian, who's Chief Executive Officer at the Calgary Catholic Immigration Society. Top of his CV, Fariborz is a nice guy, so you should know that. He's been working for over 35 years in the sector. He's the national co-chair of the Afghan Resettlement Project, and he hosts the Secretariat as well as a second national hub and 2 RAB centers. So congratulations for all the hard work that you've been doing. Thank you for all the hard work that you've been doing, and welcome to our panel today. And last but not least, we have Benita Hansraj. Benita is project director of Lifeline Afghanistan. She is a nearly 20-year veteran of the not-for-profit space, having spent over a decade with UNICEF. She has firsthand experience of refugee crises on both sides of the journey, I suppose, and was also formerly with the Canadian Centre for Human Trafficking. So welcome, Benita. All right, so you know the drill. We're going to have individual presentations, and then we'll see where we get. So Aziz, the floor is to you. Thank you very much. Oops. Oh, you all right? I'm sticking out here.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the introduction. Thank you thank you the organizers for inviting me here today in front of you. I'm actually coming from Afghanistan just 5 months ago, and I'm trying to give you a bit of real picture of what is going on and why we came to Afghanistan, what happened to us when we came here, and what is happening now to us actually in getting into Canada and becoming a Canadian citizen. As I said, actually, I was working for the last 35 years at the sector of human rights and civil society. I've been engaged in this work after losing my family members in the Civil War. By profession, I'm an engineer, graduated from the Faculty of Engineering in Kabul University. And I shifted my profession to the human rights and civil society because I thought that it's more required for us to work for human rights and for civil society rather than actually working for engineering. I don't know why I made this decision, but I made this decision because I thought it's very important for me and also very important for people of Afghanistan too, and that in that very specific time. I'm one of the luckiest actually who got the offer of the Canadian government to come and resettle in Canada. I got an offer by the ambassador of Canada in Afghanistan because I was working for programs and projects with Canadian government as well as many other donors. The offer took 4 months for me to come from Turkey. Actually, I left before the collapse of the city of Kabul in the country to the hands of the Taliban to Turkey. And the offer came to me in Turkey, and I was brought from Turkey to Canada, to Toronto. To speak about what I experienced is very simple. So it took 4 months of back and forth documentation and others. But when I arrived in Canada, I got a different services which was very valid for us at the time. We were shifted to a hotel, and the hotel was providing all the services. And with the generous support of the Canadian government, actually, I really enjoyed, my family enjoyed. But my major concern was not about what happened to me, it's what was happening to the inside of Afghanistan, to the people who are actually stuck and trapped back in the country. People who devoted their life, who dedicated their time and their efforts to make sure that they are working for civil society, for human rights, for progress of Afghanistan, for inclusion of Afghanistan to the international partnership, to make Afghanistan a progress country, but actually they trapped into the hands of the Taliban, and they were actually pushed to go backward, particularly on the issues of development, human rights, women's rights, and others. You know, you just heard yesterday that the Taliban have banned education for the women and girls after, beyond the sixth grade in the school. This is a disaster. You can't imagine 56% of the population are women in Afghanistan, and you can imagine that 55 and 56% of the country is deprived of their fundamental rights. It's a disaster. You can't even think about it. What is it? What does it mean actually for us? So I think we're still thinking of these populations, trapped behind, and there are lots of activists there who are actually very deeply engaged in human rights and issues. Their life is in danger, and we think our human rights defenders and civil society activists are really in danger, and they need to be helped as well. We do understand fully the situation of Ukraine, but we must mention that Afghanistan has experiencing the experience of Ukraine in 1980s of the last century. We had a very similar situation to Ukraine in 1980s, unfortunately. Probably I will prefer to still speak on the support of the civil society activists inside Afghanistan who have been trapped, and I would highly appreciate the generous support of the Canadian governments. I must also tell that the categories of the people who are coming to being offered to Canada, there are different categories. We have very well-educated people, very highly educated people. We have people with less education. We have people with lots of resources and people without resources here coming to Canada. And then we have people who are completely illiterate. They do not have any education. There are people who have worked as a support staff with either the Canadian government or with the Canadian military in Afghanistan, and they have been offered protection by the Canadian government of Afghanistan. So when you work with the Afghans, please always consider that there are different categories of Afghans who are from a very highly educated groups to very non-educated people in this journey of the resettlement in Afghanistan. There are fantastic work that we have experienced here. First is this, the support that we are receiving in the transition hotels. They're great. I think the only thing which is missing here is a package of information, that we should get a very a detailed package of information, what is happening and what we should do and what we should do ourselves. At the hotel that I was living, and I was offered the transition period settlement, I noticed that the work is very slow, so I tried, because we were educated family, so we tried to work for our own, and then we actually tried to apply for the SI, for our bank accounts. We tried to do our own vaccination. We booked a shopper mall for doing our registration. We went there and we actually registered, we vaccinated ourselves. So we did it ourselves because we didn't want actually the hotel to do for us, or the NGO to work for us. So we tried to do it ourselves. But I think if we would have had a better package of information, we would have done far better than what we did it, what we did as an experience. The other issue is when we get out of the hotel, the caseworker is also a very good idea. I think one of the issues which makes us which makes it easy for us is that majority of the caseworkers speak our language. So that's the best thing that you have decided, the colleagues have decided, because the caseworkers are very helpful, particularly when we get into the integration process after the hotel. We also received the training and perhaps offer from different institutions, including your organizations, that they are actually providing us employment information, services, and other also donations sometimes, and other issues which are very great, very, very important for us. A number of issues which are actually make us a bit worried about is the stress at the hotel, in the transition hotel. It's very stressful. We don't know how much, how you can imagine it, but for us, being 45 days in a hotel is very stressful. It's very stressful. And I don't know how I can explain it, because you are in the best hotel, and you're a 5-star hotel, but actually it doesn't have the facilities that you need. Actually, you cannot feel it as home. It is very difficult. So the more you reduce the stay in the hotel, the more you actually relieve us from the stress that we are facing. Documentation package in the transitional hotel is extremely important. That needs to be properly settled, how we can better find our future, how we can better struggle with the needs that we have, and how we can prepare that. Regarding the housing, the information that we provided was very small, and very less information was provided to us. So I think that needs to be very enhanced. We need to get a bit of more information what is really happening. The amount of the payment for us, fixed for as allowance for us, is very good. I think the only thing that we need is to make sure that we have the full information how to spend it, because majority of the Afghan families, they do not have an economic plan for their households, how to run the family here with the fixed economy or fixed package that you provide. That needs a bit of more elaboration, more need an assessment for more assistance for them to understand what is really happening and what is going to happen next for them. The expectation for any Afghan who comes to Canada is very high, particularly for those who have been offered resettlement program assistance. They are expecting that everything will be provided there, everything will be there. But that's not the case, particularly people who are coming from rural area, and they have, most of them actually, some of the people who are coming from the PRTs or groups, the support of the PRT groups, most of them are illiterate. Some of the women with that group, they have never seen a city. Have never seen a city. So, cities in Afghanistan is completely different to the cities in Canada. So, just you can imagine what a difference is when a woman who has never seen have not been permitted actually to see a city, now she appears in a city completely different to the whole culture and to the whole mentality that she has about the city in Canada. So we need to make sure that this is somehow adjusted. She faced a very culture shock And that needs to be adjusted properly to make sure that these are helped by us properly and they are actually receiving the most important information which is needed for them to receive. The other issue, we are very conservative society. Canada is a liberal society, to my understanding. So you can see the culture shock between these two, a conservative society and a liberal society. So I think the most important issue is how to deal with the trauma between the shift from that status to this status. I think it is something very important for all of us to consider in the future work with the Afghan refugees, particularly with the current move of the refugees. Majority of Afghans at this stage, they have experienced trauma, either being under the Taliban or being before the Taliban in a zone war, or being outside Afghanistan in any of the neighboring countries, but under pressure. The refugees in Afghanistan, both in Iran and Pakistan, they are under very high pressure, and trauma pressure of the harassment of the police, harassment, whatever you call it. So it's such a pressure under the refugees in Pakistan and Iran, and also recently in Uzbekistan, that you cannot even imagine. The police is asking money. In Tajikistan, the Afghan refugees are asked for money every moment. Even if they travel from one place to the other place, they have to pay a bribe to the police to get them permission to go from one place to the other place. So that's the situation. They're actually under a huge trauma. So we need to deal with this trauma with the Afghan refugees. What is really happening? What they really need for this period. I'm going to stop here. I don't want to waste your time, but I would be more than happy to answer any of the questions that you have about what is happening in Afghanistan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aziz. Now we'll turn to John Biles from IRCC to talk a little bit more about the government side of facilitating the Afghan resettlement. John.
Merci. Bonjour tout le monde. J'ai une présentation de 30 minutes, mais Daniel m'a dit tu as seulement 10 minutes. Par conséquent, je parle très rapidement en anglais, mais la présentation est disponible dans les deux langues officielles. We're going to take 10 minutes just to talk about the response and set the scene for two of my colleagues that I've spent a lot of time with since last August on the IRCC portion of the response to Afghanistan. One of the truths around working in resettlement is that all of us live with the terror and the certain knowledge every day when we wake up and often while we're asleep, that no matter what we do, it will not be enough. And so when you look at the UNHCR and you see before the Taliban takes over Afghanistan, before Russia invades Ukraine, 80 million people globally were refugees waiting for resettlement or a return to the homes that they had left under conditions not of their own choosing. So I came back from vacation in July. I checked my email at midnight, and 6 hours later, Afghanistan began from our perspective. 8 days later, the first flight arrived at Pearson Airport. And so we get this whiplash of despair for the depravity of humanity and the unbelievable triumph of the resilience of the human spirit. And the way that those of us who work in this particular field, and many of you do, have to balance that fear that what we do is not ever going to be enough, is that it is a victory for humanity every single time someone lands on one of these aircraft and steps down those stairs, and you see the look on their face, knowing that they feel safe and that their kids have an opportunity that they did not have before and they were not sure they would ever have again. It's not to say anything is perfect, and we're certainly going to talk about some of the warts this morning, but it is to say that we are operating in a very particular context. The pandemic absolutely cut down on movement across borders, particularly for refugees, with global health provisions around border crossing, changing all of the time in each country and often within each portion of each country. One of the challenges we had right up front was trying to ascertain where could we receive aircraft in Canada. People think I'm joking when I say that it was almost more difficult to negotiate landings at Pearson than it was to get aircraft out of Kabul. but that is actually the honest truth. When we did Operation Syrian Refugee, it was pre-pandemic. Canadian airports had lots of capacity. We had an infield terminal at Pearson. They had bus drivers and staff and people all available and space they were allowed to utilize without violating the Quarantine Act. None of that was true last August. And so there were a lot of negotiations around landing aircraft, leaving an airport in a war zone that met neither the security nor the health provisions required to gate an aircraft, to taxi up to the airport terminal. Very quickly, we had to put together a set of services from the Public Health Agency of Canada, Emergency Services, the Canadian Border Services Agency, IRCC, local health agencies to make sure that we could safely land people, because disaster would have been to violate either of those two principles on that first flight. Because what came next were 3,000 people in 3 weeks to hotels in the middle of a pandemic. And if you ever wonder while watching television during the pandemic, are jurisdictions a challenge? Those hotels were in 3 different local health zones, all of whom had different rules. So the service provider managing those hotels had to manage a group this size across 4 different hotels, each hotel with a group this big, with different rules about how they were going to provide services safely. This will be on the conference website, but I think we all know why Afghanistan and why now. I want to talk a little bit about what it is not, what we have done differently, and what we're going to look at next. So, what is the program that we're looking at? I think all of you will know right before the last federal election, there was an announcement of 20,000 individuals with ties to Canada and some connections to humanitarian programs for those deemed most vulnerable to the Taliban as it was taking over Afghanistan. In the middle of the election, that promise doubled to 40,000 individuals. Just to pause for one moment and to say in the first year of the pandemic, roughly 3,500 government-assisted refugees came to Canada. We tripled the number of refugees in that program coming last year, almost all of it in the period of August to December. We are going to double that again this year with government-assisted refugees from other countries around the world that have been waiting with UNHCR for a long time, and almost exactly the same number of Afghans coming, with just a few more service providers working a great deal more diligently and in much more challenging conditions than in the past. As the minister said in his announcement yesterday, by March 31st, roughly 10,000, or half of the initial commitment, will have landed in Canada. And there are charters being booked for both the privately sponsored and government-assisted that will arrive at a rate of roughly 300 people every week from now until June. And so that number is going to shoot up pretty quickly. As Aziz has said, part of the challenge is this is not Operation Syrian Refugee. This is not a population that is in a third country where we can run services and get people on airplanes continuously in a tight period of time and have one big surge of arrivals that we then work off over the next 9 months. These are individuals with ties to Canada that must escape a country controlled by a terrorist organization. And so only when they get out, and they get out to countries all around the world, do they get on aircraft to Canada. So only when we have a large agglomeration in one country, most typically Tajikistan or Pakistan, do they come in charters. Otherwise, it's 22 flights arriving at Pearson with a family on this plane, a family on that plane, 3 families coming from Rwanda, 2 coming from Albania, every single day. What did we do to change things up a little in this movement? We started with Toronto. It was the only airport where we could actually get an aircraft on the ground and everyone processed and admissible to Canada. Quickly we realized, and Fariborz will speak to this, I think, that a lot of individuals that spend their 2 weeks in quarantine then wish to stay in Toronto. Our capacity to handle that tripling and now the doubling of the tripling of government-assisted refugees across the country is distributed across all 41 resettlement communities. So we started to look for partners and spaces where we could send entire charter aircraft all at once. We know from the research, often from Metropolis itself, when families settle together, the retention in those communities is significantly higher than if they arrive one family at a time. So you can see at the bottom here the range of cities where we've sent large groupings of Afghans, many of whom had pre-existing relationships with one another. So the Marifat Girls' School all went to Saskatoon. The human rights defenders all went to Edmonton. Those that were locally engaged staff at NATO country embassies all went to Halifax and St. John's because they had spent a significant period of time together. I'm not going to walk through the many, many steps that were done in each hotel. But again, just to reiterate something that Aziz said, you would have up to 1,000 people in a hotel. Everybody is in quarantine. Every meal, every roll of toilet paper, every sanitary napkin, every diaper, every child's toy has to be hand-carried to their room. Every family has to be escorted out for playtime in fresh air so as not to violate the Quarantine Act. Just the volume of people movement in those hotels is unprecedented and exhausting. Some of the things that we did differently, we issued iPads or Chromebooks to everyone over the age of 5. Knowing my family, I would eat my kids after being in a hotel room with them for 3 days, or they'd eat me. And so our service providers put together packages that were age appropriate so that they could be actively doing things while they are stuck in a hotel room with one another. Some of the challenges that we're facing, as Aziz has said, isolation in a hotel is extremely debilitating, particularly when one of the things you can do is watch the news, and the news is full of news from back home that is not encouraging, to say the least. We've had every possible form of infectious disease break out in hotels in small groupings, which is what you would expect with large numbers of people fleeing a war zone, spending time in hotels. And we have navigated incredible health challenges in that space. And those were frontline workers of the resettlement agencies day in and day out. I won't speak to how it's not Syria. We can answer that in the question period. But we do know, and I want to set Fariborz up here, that from Syria we knew we wanted to capitalize on the interest of Canadians, and that we had to find a way to engage them from the beginning, because at its lightest we disappointed people who wanted to help in Syria, and we as a sector had no means to actively engage them all. At its worst, we lost allies and gained opponents by not being able to connect with them and make use of what they were offering to donate, volunteer, and so we wanted to do that differently. Second, as Aziz has said, the complex needs and assets of this population are extremely heterogeneous and varied. Without knowing what people were coming to the country with, both their assets and their needs, it's impossible to plan a service array and settlement across the country effectively. And so we implemented a standardized approach to needs and asset assessment across all 41 of the locations on resettlement, and it is starting to give us information on what we need to look at next. What are we looking at to wrap up? Just a couple of pieces. So we're starting to turn our attention to month 13. This was a major challenge for us in Operation Syrian Refugee because it was such a bunched up set of arrivals. Month 13 is when either the private support or the federal income support for government-assisted refugees comes to an end, and those that are not working transition to provincial social assistance. It is a major transition point, and if we don't plan for it now, 5 months out, we won't be able to do it super effectively. Second, we're really closely tracking the iCare data, which is the unique client use of settlement services. So we are looking at, of the adult population from Afghanistan, how many in all of the communities have accessed language assessment and then language training. For those that are school-aged, how many have been served by the Swiss programs, so we can identify where we have best practices and where we see communities that maybe are facing a little bit more challenge, so we can work together about what comes next. We're looking lastly at how we improve on-ramps for privately supported refugees to settlement, a long-standing gap that we have identified, as you have in the sector, and looking at how we increase connections with employers. We absolutely have a tension in this room and others between newcomers themselves saying, I want to work yesterday, and settlement staff saying, yes, but you should perfect English and French first and then work. The client is always the boss. And what we're hearing very strongly from many of these clients is that we collectively need to do better. We need to provide opportunities for those that want to work today, and we need to provide packages of settlement services for those who wish to work tomorrow. And the last thing I will say is just around the mental health of the workers who are on the front line. As I began, we all live in terror that what we do is never going to be enough. It is incredibly deleterious to frontline staff to work 18 hours a day, 7 days a week for 8 months, and then have people stand up who should know better and say, you are doing nothing. So please, when you're talking to your colleagues, your friends, your family members, do remember those people that are knocking on hotel room doors at 3 o'clock in the morning, trying to help the thousands of people that we have in hotels at any one point in time, launching on their new settlement trajectory in Canada. Thank you.
Merci, John. J'imagine qu'il y aura plusieurs questions pour vous après, donc vous pouvez répondre en français s'il y a des questions en français. Next up, Fariborz Birjandian to talk about the experience of a settlement services provider receiving Afghan refugees.
Thank you very much. Really nice to see everybody. I think I've been involved with the Metropolis, and thank you, Jack and the team, to bring us together, and I hope we just keep continuing meeting. Thank you, John. I think John talked about what was happening in Canada, and I'm going to focus a little bit on how we saw or where the clients were when they were coming. 3 things I hope you remember from this conversation is that the thinking process that went into this, the term of engagement, and how we stayed focused during the last 6 months. I think these are the 3 things I'd like you guys to remember. I hope so, because usually we don't remember a lot of things at the conferences. So John talked about where we were. It was different for those people. They have been involved with the mass settlement of refugees, and I'm sure a lot of you are, that from former Yugoslavian, Kosovo, Syrian, Yazidis. It was a different situation here. As John mentioned, from the day that John got the marching order till the people arrived was only 8 days. We never had that experience. Actually, I'm talking to Jack. We may even develop a course on how this was done collectively, because it was quite different, and I think that's going to happen. This is the same situation with Ukrainian. We're getting 250 of them arriving in Alberta next week. We really need to understand how we can manage on a local level. So imagine that you're living your home in Afghanistan, in a good situation, and suddenly in 2 hours or 40 hours, you find yourself in a hotel in Toronto, away from your loved one, your children are away, you could not take your children with you, your parents with you, you have nothing. Just imagine that for a second. I think it is really important to imagine that. So I think the task was really to make sure that us collectively, to make sure that we understand who they are. Usually refugees have fear when they come to a new place. But the fear of these people was tremendous for a couple of reasons. They never had time to reflect what was happening to them. We had children that got on the plane and the parents could not make it, and they arrived in Canada. Just imagine. We had family that they arrived in Toronto airport, and their 3 kids, they just were not able to go through the airport. Simple fact, not be able to go through the airport. Just imagine the state of mind. So the whole thing was that we needed really to put all the politics away that we usually have in any environment and look at it as a task. We had 8 days to prepare. John called me because I was the chair of RAP working group and said, Fariborz, this is what's happening. Let's do something about it. After I finished with him, I called a number of colleagues across the country and I said, what can we do? And then this is how we basically came up with. First, we defined the task. At the time, we only had the task of bringing 6,000 people. As John mentioned, After election, it went to 40,000 people. So the task was 40,000 people are going to come to Canada, and we are here to welcome them. So we also wanted to see what are we going to focus on. I was not thinking about the language assessment, employment, how they're going to become citizens. That was not what we were focusing on. We are focusing on a number of things. How we, IRCC, we can create a condition, IRCC could take them through the immigration process. How could we make sure that the health process is done? Because it's important. If you haven't done a TB X-ray, you cannot move anywhere in Canada, regardless if you're COVID or non-COVID. The initial settlement services, the permanent accommodation, the connection to broader community, all done through the COVID environment. Again, just imagine you have 300-400 people in the hotel. None of them could move from the rooms. And 10% of them have problems. John used to get through his boss from Ottawa that a major general called to say that in Hotel X, room 1055, there is no toothpaste. And we had about thousands of veterans, amazing people that they become a great partner to us. They were actually there to make sure that we do a good job. So this was really the process we decided to do at one point. You can see, actually, we had to make it very simple. We had to make it simple, everybody understand it. This is how we organized ourselves. I don't have that much time to go through all of that, but I try my best. So we felt we need a national body. We created a full region according to IRCC, and then we said, all the RAP provider, 34 agency got involved, and from there we created the National Steering Committee. We met every week. Thank God we had amazing people from IRC to lead that, Corinne and John. The reality was they were the best people to get into this because they had the experience, they trusted the sector, and we didn't really have to do a lot of going back and forward. We decided and we just implemented the task. And we decided also to develop a clear guideline why these committees are. So we had 4 regions. Each region had all the RAP providers, plus the umbrella organization, plus the IRCC, and in some cases province. And then from those people came up to the National RAP Steering Committee, and we met every day, every week, and we make a decision. We needed to develop a secretariat. That was very important because we needed to answer the phone. We could not just tell people to wait. And later on, you see the number of emails that was received and answered, because that was a marching order from IRCC to say we want to make sure every single email is read and answered or forwarded somewhere that they could do that. So this is the composition of the National RAP Working Group. Then we went to the National Steering Committee, and we just looked at it as the basically people that they come together and we make a decision nationally, we implement it locally. Meanwhile, all the corporations in connections started going, and Corinne actually took the lead on that, talked to a lot of them. We managed in a very short period of time to get major partnership with some key stakeholders like Airbnb and Uber, which I hope it continues forever. So we have to do a good job. So we had to create a system right away that actually would allow 34 agencies across the country access Airbnb. And again, we put an amazing team of 4 people only, all fantastic ladies that they do all the work, and I just talk about it. And these people actually created a system that could help us to manage the whole operation. So they are doing all that work on a daily basis. Again, I just give you one example. We had to create the national NAR, National Need Assessment, done at the same time, which is unprecedented. We had to get involved and partner with a major corporation outside Canada called Airbnb, receive initial $500,000, create a system that all 34 agencies could seamlessly access the services, book it, use it, make sure they put it back in a fine place. Obviously, the clientele that do go into those houses, they they're not used to Airbnb. So we had to do a lot of quality assurance that the host would have a good experience renting their place to refugees. Those are all quality assurance pieces that we have. So just give you some of the statistic. Over 9,000 people, I think we are expecting a flight just next week, another over 300 people in Calgary. We had one before. There are three flights actually of 250 of private sponsored refugee, and credit to sponsors. All of them showed up at the airport. As a risk assessment, I felt that we would have some of the hosts would not come. Everybody was there. Everybody was there, so we didn't have to worry about it. We're probably going to get another 2 or 3 charter flights coming in. So corporate donors, again, I could make a big list of that, but Amazon, Air Canada, Canadian Tire, Primacore, Walmart, McCain Food, Airbnb, and Uber, they are just some of the people actually, they helped us. For those, they may have a doubt, because it was COVID, talking to one of my colleagues and said, really 34,000? Yes, really 34,837 emails were received. And these are the number of emails that just went to the Secretariat. The email that IRCC received, the email I got personally received, because people find your email, that would, and veterans, it would go to 40,000, even more than that. But the commitment was that we answer all of them, because we get emails that saying that we are in Kabul, hiding in a basement. If I get caught, I get killed. And how can you deal with that email? And I tell you this, Canada has a 10 years deployment in Afghanistan. 10 years deployment in a military means that you engage hundreds, not thousands of local people. So as the Prime Minister said, they were there for our soldiers, and we will be here for them. So it was very, very personal for many people in Canada that they really wanted to make sure that people get this group get the protection they needed and what they could do as best as we can. Again, vaccination was an issue. We had to take them through the whole vaccination situation. I think I just put, 10,000, but it is very moderate, because we had much more than 10,000 vaccination when does that across the country. And the success factors. Again, as I said, we are just talking about 10 minutes about the operation that we kept at least 100 people awake every night to talk. Every day we had a number of meetings with different stakeholders. Some of the factors I would like to maybe you remember that. Clarity in task. Sometimes we don't spend time to clarify what are we trying to do. I'm involved with the Ukrainian conversation with one of my local, my Alberta, and one of the problems is we have not defined the task. And that creates a lot of problems. So to my younger colleagues, I would like to maybe ask you to do that. Even in your agency, define what the task is, and then plan based on that. Relevant stakeholders at the table. This is so important. What we did, we actually removed 4 layers of communication. We brought the people that actually do this job. They are the expert. They have actually authority on what they are doing to do the job. Just one example, in PNT, we have a steering committee, implementation committee, 3 ladies, my colleagues, they are actually managing that, or they are co-chairing that. Between them, there is 90 years of experience. Catherine Friesen, I think she's on the audience from Edmonton. I mean, she can run it. So we needed to bring her at the table. And I really want to suggest in the future we do that. Try, especially when it is crisis. When we have time, 6 months to play politics and talk to each other, no problem. But if you have to manage a crisis, bring the people at the table that they are going to do the job. And also share leadership. The shared leadership, I think we talk about it, but we have to demonstrate it in action. So we never made any decision for anybody. Everybody made their own decision within very clear guideline. And I think that was part of the success. The other success we had, the harmony between IRCC and sector. If you would have gone to the hotels, so IRCC staff, although was there to process the immigration, was actually handling diapers, going to each room and collecting the garbage. So I think that was something we need to capture, because it's not about IRCC's sector when it comes to situation like Afghanistan resettlement. And the other thing that I would like to maybe talk about, sometimes we talk about doing things nationally, but there is a role for playing national role. Nationally, you can't implement anything. You can just think about things. You can formulate approaches, but it all has to be actually implemented locally. So local people, my settlement staff that works at the hotel is far more important for IRCC, for this program, than me. Because he is the one, or she's the one actually dealing with the staff, with the people. So I think make sure the frontline staff are aware of the big picture. That's so important. Sometimes we forget to do that. We just ask them, you need to do that, and person does it without knowing what impact he or she's going to make. So these are lessons that I learned, and I hope you remember those things. And being inclusive without losing focus. I know everybody wants to help. Everybody is amazing, have amazing system, but I really don't think we should be, when you want to focus, if you are talking about room and shelter, we don't want to talk about long-term career planning. It's important. I'm not saying it's not important, but the conversation is another table. And I think we need to learn that. For the sector, with IRCC, we can't expect them to do that because they have to be nice to everybody. I'm sorry to say, I mean, I'm saying in a good way. But for us, as a sector, we are here to do something so important. So we have no time to play games. We have to look at what needs to be done, and let's do it. So that's what I'm saying. Define the task. Know what it is, priority. I mean, the Ukrainian situation, I'm suggesting my province, don't worry about next 4 months. Focus on the first 3 months. That's it. Because things may change. Things are going to change. So focus. And transparency in decision-making and process throughout the operation. You have to be consistent. You have to make decisions. You can't just change your decision-making process on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. It has to be very clear. And I say that with confidence because we have urged everybody to give us a feedback, because it's just a lot of work that we are doing together. The glory is the resettlement of people that are going to be becoming a Canadian citizen in a few years. Hopefully they all go to your canoe program. And they would become, I mean, I came as a refugee. How many people came here as a refugee? Raise your hand. So I'm really talking to a bunch of converted. You know what it is. And I think that's important. Remember that. Again, not losing focus is so important that I really feel that we should do it. So going back to how I started, think about the thinking process, how we did that, how we kept focused, and the term of engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, waiting patiently, Benita, Hansraj, and then we will get to some questions. So if you have some questions, start thinking, and you'll be able to put them to the panelists afterwards. Fariborz is pointing out the boost. Benita has asked us to remind everybody that she is the tallest in her household. And so at home, she's a giant.
Thank you. Thank you, Fariborz. Lifeline Afghanistan was founded in August 2021, and it was immediately before the government, oh, sorry, 1 second. I'm having an issue with this.
I think the gentleman will change it for you in just a moment.
Oh, okay. There we are. So I'll just start from the top. Lifeline Afghanistan was founded in August 2021, immediately before the government of Canada made its commitment to accept 40,000 Afghan refugees. And ever since that announcement was made, actually since the day we were founded, just like Fariborz and his team and the IRCC, we have been flooded with emails from thousands upon thousands of Canadians who are willing, ready, and able to help privately sponsor Afghan refugees. Lifeline Afghanistan is ultimately a national project dedicated to ensuring that Afghan refugees and newcomers are able to build vital local connections in their communities and be provided with sustained wraparound services and programming and an evidence-based empowerment model that really is there to help ensure that our newcomers build a life, have a journey where they're able to succeed in the long term. Ultimately, we were founded by a collective that has 42 years of experience in citizen-led private sponsorship, responding first to the unique needs of sponsored refugees with our work in 1979, helping Vietnamese refugees flee and find haven here in Canada. And again in 2015 through Operation Lifeline Syria and the Ryerson Student Union Lifeline Syria Challenge as well. Through our founders, who include Wendy Souquier, who is such a veteran member of Metropolis, Senator Ratna Omnivar, who heads the Refugee Jobs Table, Sally Armstrong, who is a well-known journalist, and Hila Turarki, who is an Afghan lawyer, we were able to harness all of that collective experience and leadership to ensure that we are proud to be a project of the Ted Rogers School of Management and the Diversity Institute. And we've built ourselves and structured ourselves based on 42 years of lessons learned. And of course, most recently in 2015, where more than 1,000 volunteers were mobilized, millions were raised to help resettle Syrian refugees across the country, combined with young students from Ryerson University, the University of Toronto, OCAD, but supported by thousands of Canadians across the country. And actually, we have so much of your support. More than 50 organizations are part of our collective and part of our founding partners and help propel everything that we do forward. And that ultimately helps us guide our mission to build awareness, to engage Canadians in the sponsorship of Afghan refugees across Canada, to curate resources with partners like you, to connect newcomers and Canadians as well, to supports from coast to coast, and we hope in due course, the third coast. We support trauma-informed approaches to skills development and working with Canadians, employers, and service providers to create pathways to economic and social inclusion. Ultimately, our goal is to build work that is sponsored and promoted by an evidence-based approach that is innovative and collaborative, that thinks outside the box, that asks questions, that really probes the needs of our newcomers and helps to quickly meet them. Some of our supporters include, of course, the Right Honourable, or the former Governor General of Canada, Adrienne Clarkson, who herself arrived in Canada as a refugee. Mayor John Tory, and not at all because we are Toronto-centric, but because Mayor John Tory has a personal history of actually privately sponsoring families into Canada. And through his support and the work of the City of Toronto, we were able to work with the United Way to establish the Toronto Afghan Resettlement Fund, which of course is an innovative fund to help resettlement services meet those needs, stretch those boundaries, and think of new programs that they would like to take to scale using the fund as seed funding. And of course, the Honourable Senator Ratna Omnivar, who has been a tireless supporter of refugees and a staunch advocate for newcomer rights in this country. She leads much of our work with employers as well. But our work is really focused in three phases. And the first is helping individuals find a pathway to a new home. We've been working across the country with Universities Canada as well to advocate for student visa pathways to open up for Afghan students to arrive here in Canada. We work with groups of 5, with thousands of Canadians across the country who have raised their hand to say, how can I help? Or I'm just a group of 3. Can you help me be a group of 5? And of course, working with employers who are interested in harnessing the EMPP to help newcomers arrive in this country. And all along, since August, I've had the pleasure of working with John and his team and Fariborz and his team as well to help support government-assisted refugees who have already arrived. As Fariborz has said, we've all been flooded by the generosity of Canadians. And actually, a ton of our work has all been focused on meeting their generous needs and actually being able to help refugees as quickly as possible on arrival. And our second phase is, of course, sponsorship and connection, working with Canadians, working with corporate partners, working with foundations to fundraise the dollars that are needed for sponsorship, linking that up with in-kind donations, and volunteers who, in some cases, would love to be a sponsor but might not have the financial means to do so. But those volunteers really fulfill a really very critical component in this process, and that's that they bring to the table social capital. They're able to really help a newcomer very quickly build their own community where they reside. And we know with that social capital, that helps our newcomers ultimately navigate their new home and leads to success. And we know through our work with the Future Skills Center and our research done there, that we too, as Canada, have some really significant needs. We know that there are major shortages in engineering and digital skills. And in all of our primary sectors, and the numbers on the screen definitely speak for themselves. And we know that employers are having to alternatively turn to gig workers and outsourcing to help meet their daily needs. And they're growing, especially with the pandemic, exits from the labor market as well. Retention is a long-term issue too. We need refugees as much as they need us. And some of our employers have some very bold things to say about their experiences and how much they desperately need the talent of our Afghan refugees. But we're also here to meet the complex needs. Of course, as John mentioned, like all populations, this is a heterogeneous one. There are varied needs where we have individuals with a high standard of education and others who may alternatively need support in learning English while they're here. And we have to match that against the fact that there are some newcomers that arrive today and want that job today versus others who need the time to work through their trauma and have a job tomorrow. We're also working as well towards helping to ensure that our initial arrivals really do have the ability to receive some sort of training when they're here, and alternatively work for opportunities to pre-arrival training as well. And of course, we're working with a pilot with the region of Peel in Ontario to really take on new approaches for how we can fill the gap for children and their loss of education. And in phase 3, we work with our partners at Magnet and the Future Skills Center on an economic empowerment and training pathway, where we work to assess career path and train, have our platform for job matching, as well as providing employment wraparound services and evaluation as well. And we're doing all of that with Canadians. And I think it's important to remember that more than 3 million Canadians engaged in the settlement of Syrian refugees just not too many years ago. And that number has grown and grown year over year to even more Canadians who want to help refugees call Canada home and certainly build their new life here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benita. We will now take questions. Il y a deux micros, un pour chaque côté de la salle, donc gauche et droite. If you have a question, please come up to the microphone and ask your question. Emphasis on question marks, please, not statements. And if you can keep them short, then we can have more of them. And I think that would be of value to everybody. So do we have a first question? We have 2 or 3 coming to the microphone here. If you'd like to line up on the microphone on my right side as well, we'll cut to you in turn. Yes, please go ahead. It's on, we hear you.
Okay, great stuff. All right, my name is Josephine Naika. I'm actually the vice chair for CCIS. My question is a little bit broader, however, it does affect all refugees and I guess all newcomers, including Afghans. Look, there is a lot of skill set and experience within the sector. And one of the major challenges facing newcomers is relating to the backlog within the application process. So my question is, what do you think the sector, having this large experience and fine people within it, what role does the sector have to play in easing that backlog? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are you targeting that question at anyone in specific, or would you just like it to be at the panel in general?
I'm looking for a solution, so whoever has a solution.
That sounds good. Thank you very much. Would anyone like to take this question?
Why don't you batch some questions and then we'll answer them?
John is contemplating his answer. Why don't we take a second question and we can put them to response together.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rafiee and I'm from Prince George from IMSS. I have a question we were talking about the cultural shock, and people are coming from refugees from Afghanistan, and we are giving another cultural shock to keeping in 5-star hotels, keeping in the bigger cities like Vancouver and Toronto and space. Why don't we focus on the small community to keep these people over there in the small communities so that they can feel like a home rather than they are like feeling like, oh, we are lost totally. Another thing is we have to stop making them giving the like only just giving the money is not going to help them. We have to empower them to work there, and they need the work. They are working coming from the people. They work hard in their right hand. They are not going to work in night, like a big organization. And even they are feeling very like lost when they are working in the big buildings also. So I have a question like why we are not encouraging them to and empowering them to work in a smaller community where they can find their home and rather than they are lost. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John, have you had some time to think about the first question, the sector's role, given difficulties in the application process is how I heard it.
So I often have this conversation with individuals because people see IRCC and think, oh, so tell me about how to deal with citizenship or immigration. My wife is an anthropology professor at a university, and I like to say to her when she asks me the same questions, could you just tell me what's happening in the Faculty of Business? Because I have this question around business. And not surprisingly, she doesn't often have a good answer around business. So the people who do immigration are a completely different group of individuals than those who do settlement. And yet, 23 years into doing this at conferences like this, I often get asked immigration questions. So you will get a settlement person's answer to an immigration question. When you look at the levels document that's tabled in Parliament legislatively every year, and as the Minister mentioned yesterday, Canada is taking the largest number of newcomers in Canadian history year over year over year. So it's not like there aren't a large number of individuals coming. However, when you read IRPA, the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, and you see the objectives at the beginning of the act, or you attend any levels conversation that's ever happened in the country anywhere, everybody would like more of every category all of the time for very good and valued reasons. And the result is way more interest in coming to Canada than there is space or capacity to process. Things that the sector can do to facilitate are things like making sure that your clients are aware of all of the pathways that exist that come to Canada, making sure that you steer them to those who are accredited or are knowledgeable about the different pathways so that the applications arrive complete, accurate, and current. Because one of the biggest things that happens in immigration processing is incomplete applications. Every time someone stops to contact someone to get them to submit further documentation, that's time that's taken away from processing other files. There are many ways to immigrate to Canada, and making sure that we collectively are as informed of that changing set of doorways, and we make sure that clients know all of their options, not just the option we ourselves took or that we last learned about, will make a real difference to how that processing time occurs. But ultimately, because there are more people applying than there are spaces, there is always going to be some periods of time for some types of files that are going to take a little bit longer. On small centers, this is something that seized us since Jenny Coderre was our minister many years ago, about how we ensure that, and it's an objective in IRPA as well, the benefits of immigration are spread from coast to coast to coast. And it's something that we're very actively looking at in refugee resettlement. For the longest time, there was a feeling that refugees needed to go to the largest urban centers because of the service array that was available there. Increasingly, we're in fact seeing that research, often done by people who have participated in Metropolis in the past, actually do better in smaller centers. And so understanding why and for whom is a major preoccupation. As Aziz said, we have people from Afghanistan that are coming from big urban centers and are afraid that Vancouver doesn't have running water, and therefore didn't want to come to Vancouver until they learned a little bit more about Canada's other major urban centers. And we have people who come from rural areas who are quite alienated when they find themselves in Edmonton or Halifax and are much more interested in a smaller community. So Fariborz, I think, has some great examples of what we've been doing in this space.
Thank you. I think I'm going to go to the second gentleman, the gentleman that asked the question. I think this is a very good thing for us to think, not to really get an answer here. Settling people in a new country is a science, is a social science. That's why we have so many academia here. That's why so many research being done. We have to have a better understanding. Again, challenges are like small centers versus big centers, empowering versus the basically trauma-informed approach. Those are the thing is different. So one thing I want to let everybody, I think you agree, most of you with me, not all refugees are created different. They are people, they are individual. A family of 5, the father, mother, the daughter, 2 other kids, they all have been impacted differently. So following the science is that you have to create something that would work for individual, not refugees. Refugees is a very, very broad word. So I think what you said, it is within our approaches. If you look at least agencies and even the funding that IRCC fund, 4 years ago, we never even could dream of a case management. Now there are resources to do case management. I think we should celebrate that. 5 years ago, we could not dream even when people come here, we can give them devices. Now we give them upon arrival. So those are the good things we are doing. And I think eventually, look at the research by OCDE, look at research in Canada. Refugees could make good citizens. Look at the house ownership across the country with the refugees, very high. Look at the income after some time. Look at the second generation. So the story of refugee in Canada is a positive story. We have to build on that. Thank you.
Let's take 2 more questions. Perhaps the gentleman can go first.
Hello, Dan Hebert. I'd like, first of all, to thank the panelists for a really great panel, and hello, friends on the panel. What I'm really struck by is the profound differences in the contextual situations of 3 crises that have happened in such quick succession: the Syrian, the Afghanistan, and now Ukraine. And in each case, Canada has put together profoundly different approaches in how refugees are going to be brought to Canada, how they're going to be settled in Canada. Now, I wonder if you could just reflect, or those of you who wish to, could just reflect a bit on how that approach is negotiated, how it's settled. Like, what kinds of ingredients go into the thinking about how different the responses are going to be from one to the other. And then the follow-on point is, I really appreciated Fariborz's points about what we've learned and need to keep, but it must be very difficult to take lessons from one crisis to another, given that the responses have been so different. Thank you.
Thank you. And on my left.
From Square Research NGO, but former colleague of John at IRCC on temporary foreign workers and international mobility program. Like Birjandian, thank you to the panel for great presentations, congratulations, and thank you for your work. Amazing. John, you touched on the need to involve employers as much as possible, and, to help refugees and permanent residents in crisis and pressure times of finding employment quickly. And I'm wondering how much we're borrowing from lessons from the temporary foreign worker program and international mobility program. ESDC makes public information on all the employers that hire temporary foreign workers in the Open Canada portal. It's hidden, but it's there. IRCC has information on all the employers that hire foreign workers in the international mobility program. So we're talking about 400,000 foreign workers a year, and we have the contact information. And I think Benita was starting to touch on that, like how you make links on the TFWP and IMP, and wondering if you can sort of elaborate on that.
Thank you. We're running up on time, and there are more questions, so if we can keep the answers short as well, we can go through them. Let's take them in reverse order about connections to employers. Benita, would you like to follow up on that?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So we are partnered with the Future Skills Center, as well as the Magnet platform, where we're connected with over 35,000 employers across Canada. There are many employers who, due to their skills shortages, have actually raised their hand to say that they are interested in the EMPP program to help fill their skills shortages and gaps. So there is a direct connection between skill shortages, refugees, and our employers through the work that we do. And I'm just cognizant of time, but.
Okay, thank you. On the, sorry, Aziz, go ahead.
On the issue of why the Afghans are not actually being settled in small communities where they feel comfortable rather than actually sitting in the cities, I think there are three important issues. One is the economic situation and the work that they can get in the bigger cities. In the cities, their economy is better. Second is the existence of their relatives. And the third is issue of concern. If they are going to go to the rural areas, they will get actually more isolated. So these are the three important issues that they prefer to stay in the bigger cities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There was a question about the diversity of approaches to different refugee waves, crises, situations. Pick your noun, and how they get developed, how those choices are made. John, perhaps you might be able to shed some light on that.
Could I ask first my question, because it's similar to that?
Okay, sure, please.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes.
So I came as a refugee 19 years ago to Winnipeg, and it was winter time, and I was looking at the snow, and I thought, I am from Eritrea, so by the Red Sea there are lots of salt. I thought the snow was the salt. So it was very, very shocking when I saw my cousins. I was privately sponsored, but when my cousins were with a lot of jacket and stuff, I couldn't understand. But then I realized that the culture was actually colder than the weather, so it was a little bit more shocking. So my question is similar to my previous question. When immigration is making this process, what do they use? What is the action when you are choosing? How much is it choosing and picking from one country and then jumping to the other and jumping to the other? And what happened last year in Ethiopia, there was a huge crisis. Nobody talked about it. I really feel hurt. 3-4 days ago when I was coming, I told my children that I'm traveling, and my younger son, who is 13 now, both my 3 boys are First generation Canadians. And he told me that in school, at church, they are asking for Ukrainian. Don't take me wrong, Ukrainians are the ones who made me feel comfortable, welcomed in Winnipeg. I was supported to settle, to feel our home to be warm, but my boys were really hurt because my brother-in-law, we have been trying to bring him for the last 6 years, we could not. And last year, we lost about 35,000. We do not know where they are. They vanished from the refugee camps. Nobody talk about it. There are more than 70,000 Tigrayan, North Ethiopian refugees. Nobody talk about it. It was everywhere. So I would like to know how to address these things and who are these decision makers who are making. Are we less human? Are you what?
So, thank you. So not only how are the decisions made in terms of policy, but there are clearly blind spots. How are they getting missed? What can we do to fill them in?
So, as I mentioned in my previous answer, many different objectives to the Immigration Act and Refugee Protection Act at all times, and it is a balancing act that is undertaken. Each crisis around the world, whether it is an earthquake, a civil war, an invasion, a takeover of a terrorist organization, brings to the fore competing priorities. And that's what we have elected officials to negotiate. So the approach is often very similar in terms of there's a toolkit that is available to us. And generally speaking, the first thing the department does is it prioritizes anyone that's in any program that comes from that country. So whether that's the response to the earthquake in Haiti or a military invasion on any continent on Earth, that tends to be the very first thing we do because it is the most rapid thing that we can do within our sphere of control. Then there is an active engagement with stakeholders. Some of you in the room, many different parties that are not regularly part of settlement, but because of world events, suddenly find themselves in that discussion. Veterans with the Afghans, the Canadian media that had strong connections to those interpreters, every Ukrainian organization in Canada, or anyone who has ever had connections with Ukrainians is suddenly in the settlement business today. So finding that open field of communication with stakeholders to find out what we can do, how quickly can we do it, and then elected officials finding the balancing point of what is possible with the resources we have available. Not just dollars, but people. It is not quick to process newcomers. And so I get every day in this current role a list of the refugees that are coming to Canada. In the case of Dan's question, the Syrians were the single largest displaced population on Earth at the time that it occurred. They may still be the most displaced population on Earth according to the UNHCR, even in the events of the last month. There are still very large numbers of Syrians coming to Canada today, 5 years later. There are sizable numbers of government-assisted refugees coming from Ethiopia and Eritrea every week. They're not making the media in the way that the Afghans were or the Ukrainians are now, but the government has opted for additional positions. So unlike Syria, where we paused landings of all other government-assisted refugees owing to the urgency of the crisis, brought in a very large number of people over a short period of months and resumed. In the case of Afghanistan, we are bringing all of those individuals that are UNHCR referred, and then we are bringing Afghans on top of that amount. And so that makes a profound difference to how it works. But where public attention focuses doesn't necessarily indicate what the numbers look like. So we receive hundreds of government-assisted refugees every week from other parts of the world as well. And that's part of the miracle of what the resettlement agencies are doing, is they are doing both populations at the same time, month over month over month, in the middle of a pandemic.
I'd just like to take the two questions. We're just running up on time.
I just wanted to
you can add it into the next answer.
Sure.
Yeah, please go ahead. Thank you.
So Bernhard Zagros from Aurora Family Therapy Center. As I was just wondering, like, if Ukrainian model will be applied to respond to future conflict, future Afghan, like having temporary solution and not asking for a proof of refugee status?
Okay, and the second question?
Hi, my name is Akim and I work for ISS of BC. The questions I have comes from my clients. There are two questions, and one is a technical question, the second is policy one. The technical one is that the 40,000 allocation was given for GAR or government-assisted refugees or not. So this is what, and if it was, the people you say that they are coming from Afghanistan to Tajikistan or Pakistan, they might be eligible or not. But what about the people that they are eligible under this 40,000, but they cannot go because they do not have proper identification and passports? So while evacuation from inside Afghanistan is stopped, how the government of Canada is helping those that they are eligible, but they are stuck in Afghanistan under Taliban. The second question, which is about policy, both questions are at attention of John, is about the definition of extended family member. There's a lot of Canadians here that they believe their families are eligible and should be able, especially after the crisis, the war in Ukraine, they should be able to bring their brothers and sisters, but the brother and sister in your definition is extended family member. Although we have seen that a lot of families that they arrive in the past 6 months, they included extended family members within the groups. So it's a double tier system, so how you respond to that? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Fariborz, John, we need to give these people a break, so let's...
Actually, I'm going to go back to Dan's question, very important question. We are doing things that we know they are different. I think Dan would agree with me, no one situation is the same. All of them are different. However, we as a sector, we play a number of roles. We are practitioners, we are designer of services, we are the one that actually engage the community. But we also advocate for policy changes, making sure. I think we have to get better at doing that. A question I raised, and I know Chris is in the room, we talked about it, why sector does not have a response plan together? Why don't we have a response plan for the sector, regardless of what governments want to be doing? We know the government will do it based on a lot of other factors. Every factor changes the approach, even the temperature. People coming this summer or winter, I think, impacts the policy, I would say. So I think this is the question for us, how us as a sector, learning from this experience to develop a response to crisis of refugee coming to Calgary, that we own it. Thank you.
Thank you. John, about documents, extended family, what's your response to the question, please?
So the credo of the public service is fearless advice and loyal implementation. The fearless advice that we are called upon to offer has constraints on it that you are not equally constrained by. So to Fariborz's point, many of the differences you see come up in conversations and come from research and evaluations and evidence that people in this room have produced over the last 30 years. That produces the toolboxes that we can use as we approach each of the urgencies that we face. The very nature of immigration means that it's never static, and so it continues to move. There was absolutely a different definition used for extended families for the emergency evacuation from Kabul in the middle of a war zone than the usual definition that is in IRPA. A lot of that has to do with the commitment that Canada has made to those individuals that assisted both global affairs and our armed forces during the engagement in Afghanistan. And when they looked at who was vulnerable as a result of the cooperation with Canada, it encompassed a wider range of individuals that were at risk of being targeted because of their connection to Canada. And so the objective was to try to get as many people connected and on a list for harm because of their involvement with Canada. And so that's why there was that shift in the definition of family for that population.
Okay, thank you. Everyone's looking for a coffee break, a bathroom break. I have one final question that is on my mind and I think on everyone else's mind. And this is a difficult question which you may not be able to answer. The government is committed, as it said, to 40,000 Afghan refugees resettled. You illustrated the many challenges as to why that is difficult to do, which we accept. The number we saw was 9,000. 40,000 will happen when?
The minister has been, our current minister has been consistent that the expectation is a 2-year time frame from August of last year. But an awful lot of it is determined by and it is, as Fariborz says, it's not just GARs. It is a combination of government-assisted refugees and privately sponsored refugees. It is a combination of those that were already in the inventory. So in Tajikistan, those are privately sponsored refugees from an earlier flow, and future privately sponsored refugees, future refugees that don't have a tie to Canada that are referred by the UNHCR. And the human rights defenders and extended family members of the 2 earlier waves of Afghans that came right after the government or the Canadian military left Afghanistan. So that 40,000 is a discrete population comprised of at least 4 or 5 subpopulations. And if Syria is anything to go by, we will be receiving government-assisted refugees and privately sponsored refugees from Afghanistan for years to come, over and above that 40,000.
Okay, I want to thank you in particular, John. You know, these are questions that a lot of people are anxious about, and you have some control, but not all, and yet you're here to answer for them. So thank you very much for your gracious responses and for your patience and for taking these questions. I also want to thank the rest of our panel, Benita, Fariborz, Aziz, for sharing your experiences, and thanking all of you for your patience, for your kind and incisive questions. I wish you a great conference. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. It's always such a negative experience when you show pictures.
Yeah.
What is the problem? You know I don't have no other women, don't want no other women. But you just seem to be like, you gotta have every man in town. Out of town too, I guess, cause I be at work, I don't know what's going on. But I still love you and I want you. I mean, let's just give it a real try. Damn, I'm lonely, Mom. I've been working 16, 18 hours a day. And I come home